Courtroom Bombshell. Danny's shocking confession changes everything in Willow's trial. The Port Charles courthouse fell into stunned silence as a revelation that nobody saw coming turned the entire Willow Tate case upside down. After days of legal battles and mounting evidence that seemed to spell disaster for the nurse, a last-minute confession from an unexpected source delivered the shock of a lifetime and ultimately saved Willow's life. The trial reaches its climax. Willow Tate has been fighting for her freedom, standing trial for the attempted murder of Drew Kane. Everyone in her corner knows the truth. She didn't pull the trigger. Her friends, her family, and her legal team have worked tirelessly to prove her innocence, despite the physical evidence seemingly stacked against her. Alexis Davis, Willow's sharp and determined attorney, has presented every argument she can muster, challenging testimony and questioning the prosecution's case. The circumstantial evidence has been damaging. Security footage, witness statements, and forensic details have all pointed toward one conclusion, or so it seemed. The prosecution has methodically built a narrative that places Willow at the scene, suggesting her motive was revenge after losing custody of her children. The facts were hard to ignore, and whispers of a guilty verdict began circulating through the courthouse hallways. But then came the moment that changed everything. The unexpected revelation. As the trial appeared to be heading toward a verdict, Danny Morgan made a stunning appearance in the courtroom. The young man, visibly nervous and conflicted, took the stand and asked to make a statement. What he revealed left the judge, jury, lawyers, and spectators gasping. Danny confessed that several months ago, he discovered something that had shattered his world. He was not the biological son of Jason Morgan, the man who raised him and has been his father figure his entire life. Instead, his real biological father was Drew Kane. Neither Drew nor Jason had any knowledge of this truth until this very moment in court. I found out, Danny said, his voice trembling as he looked directly at the judge, that Drew is my real father. Jason doesn't even know. Drew doesn't know. Nobody knew except me. A secret that led to tragedy. Danny went on to explain that he had struggled profoundly with this information, learning that the man he thought was his father wasn't his real parent, and discovering his true paternity belonged to someone else entirely, sent him into an emotional spiral. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't move past it. The anger and confusion festered inside him, eating away at his peace of mind. Then, in a moment of uncontrolled rage and hurt, Danny made a decision that would change everything. He went to confront Drew, and in that confrontation, overwhelmed by emotion and unable to control himself, Danny shot Drew. I didn't mean to make it this bad, Danny said, tears streaming down his face. But I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle the truth about who my real father is. When I saw Drew, everything just broke inside me. The courtroom erupted. Spectators whispered frantically to one another. Some gasped audibly. The judge called for order, banging the gavel repeatedly as the room descended into chaos. The pieces finally fit. As the implications settled in, everything suddenly made sense. The evidence that had pointed to Willow, it had never been about her at all. The prosecution had built an entire case on a false premise. Willow, despite having motive and despite the circumstantial details, was innocent. The real shooter had finally revealed himself, not out of a desire for justice, but out of a desperate need to clear his conscience and save an innocent woman from prison. Alexis Davis stood from her chair, her expression one of vindication mixed with sympathy. She had believed in her client all along, and now the truth had finally come to light. She addressed the court with quiet confidence. Your Honor, as you can see, my client's innocence has been established. The real perpetrator has confessed to this crime. I move for the immediate dismissal of all charges against Willow Tate. The prosecution had no choice but to concede. Their case had crumbled entirely. All of their carefully presented evidence, which had seemed so damning just hours before, now appeared in an entirely new context. Justice prevails, but at what cost? The judge deliberated for only a short time before making her ruling. She looked directly at Willow and delivered the words everyone had been hoping to hear. The court finds the defendant, Willow Tate, not guilty of all charges. You are free to go. The relief that washed over Willow's face was visible to everyone in the courtroom. She had been vindicated. Her legal nightmare was finally over. But the cost of that vindication was steep. It had come at the expense of a young man whose life had just been torn apart by his own confession. The aftermath. As court officers approached to take Danny into custody, Jason Morgan sat frozen in shock. He had just learned, in the most public and traumatic way possible, that his son, the boy he raised, was not biologically his child. The revelation hit him like a physical blow, and he struggled to process the magnitude of what he had just heard. Drew, too, was reeling. He had a biological son he never knew existed, and that son had just shot him and confessed to the crime in a packed courtroom. The complications, the questions, and the emotional weight of that revelation would take months to sort through. Danny, once a promising young man with his whole life ahead of him, now faced serious criminal charges. His arrest was swift and inevitable. As he was led away in handcuffs, the weight of his actions finally seemed to sink in completely. He had saved Willow's life, but destroyed his own in the process. A town left reeling. Port Charles would spend weeks, months, perhaps processing what had happened in that courtroom. The trial that had consumed the town's attention for so long had concluded not with careful deliberation, but with a shocking confession that had upended multiple lives in a single moment. Willow was finally free. She could reclaim her life, her career, and her dignity, but her freedom had come at a tremendous human cost. A young man's entire future had changed in the span of a few minutes. The bonds between Jason and Danny, between Drew and his newly discovered son, between all the people connected to this tragedy, all of it would have to be rebuilt from the ashes of this devastating revelation. In Port Charles, where secrets and lies had long been the currency of survival, the truth had finally emerged. And as always in this town, the truth came with a price that nobody could have anticipated. Next, we will learn about the issue of Brad Cooper's desperate quest to reclaim the love he once lost, and whether his troubled past will forever stand between him and a second chance at happiness with Lucas Jones. Brad's return and hidden agenda. Brad Cooper has made his way back to Port Charles with what appears to be a singular mission burning in his heart, winning back his ex-husband, the compassionate and principled Dr. Lucas Jones. After months of globe-trotting adventures, expensive dates with international models, and living what many would consider a lavish lifestyle funded by questionable means, Brad has returned to face the music. But beneath the designer clothes and practiced smile lies a man who knows exactly what he wants, and more importantly, what he's lost. The question isn't whether Brad desires Lucas back in his life. That much is crystal clear from the moment he set foot back in town. The real question is whether Brad has truly evolved from the manipulative schemer who drove Lucas away in the first place, or if he simply refined his approach to getting what he wants. The timing of Brad's return couldn't be more complicated. Lucas isn't sitting at home pining away for his former spouse, drowning his sorrows in late-night ice cream sessions while scrolling through old photos. Far from it. Lucas has moved on in a way that seems both genuine and healthy, having built a new life with Marco Rios in the romantic seclusion of Spoon Island. The two have created what can only be described as a love bubble, that magical phase of a relationship where the rest of the world fades into background noise, and all that matters is the person sharing your space. They've established routines, inside jokes, and the kind of comfortable intimacy that comes from truly knowing and accepting another person. Watching from the sidelines as Lucas laughs at Marco's jokes and touches his arm with casual affection must feel like a dagger to the heart, a heart that Brad himself broke through his own actions. The Spoon Island obstacle. Marco Rios represents more than just a romantic rival. In Brad's eyes, he's a living, breathing reminder of everything Brad failed to be during his marriage to Lucas. Where Brad brought drama, secrets, and manipulation, Marco appears to offer stability, honesty, and genuine care. The fact that they've chosen to build their relationship on Spoon Island with its gothic romance and relative isolation from Port Charles drama, speaks volumes about what Lucas values now. He's chosen peace over chaos, transparency over secrets, and a fresh start over recycled promises. Breaking through that sanctuary won't be as simple as showing up with flowers and a heartfelt apology. Brad would need to somehow shatter the trust and security Lucas has found with Marco, and do so in a way that doesn't immediately reveal his hand. It's a delicate operation that requires finesse Brad may not possess. Of course, in Brad's fantasy version of events, he imagines orchestrating some dramatic revelation or unfortunate series of events that would expose cracks in Lucas and Marco's relationship. He dreams of being there precisely when Lucas needs a shoulder to cry on, ready to offer comfort and remind him of the good times they once shared. It's textbook manipulation disguised as fate, and it's precisely the kind of scheming that got Brad into trouble before. The irony isn't lost on anyone paying attention. Brad's greatest obstacle to winning Lucas back isn't actually Marco at all. It's Brad himself and his inability to resist falling back into old patterns of behavior when faced with a problem he can't solve through honest communication. The weight of past betrayals. Let's not forget the mountain of betrayal Lucas has already climbed when it comes to forgiving Brad. Before Brad ever packed his designer luggage and left Port Charles in his rearview mirror, the two men had already been spending time together again, tentatively exploring whether the connection they once shared could be rekindled. There were coffee dates that ran long, lingering glances that suggested old feelings hadn't completely died, and moments where it seemed like maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Then Brad made the catastrophic decision to come clean about blackmailing Portia Robinson, shattering any hope of reconciliation before it could truly take root. Lucas made it abundantly clear that he couldn't be with someone who continued to make such destructive choices, regardless of the complicated history they shared. This wasn't a case of Lucas being unforgiving or holding grudges unfairly. It was about self-preservation and maintaining boundaries with someone who had repeatedly demonstrated that personal gain would always trump ethical behavior. Even when Lucas was single and theoretically available, he chose loneliness over settling for a relationship that would inevitably lead to more heartache. That speaks to personal growth and self-respect that Brad would do well to study and emulate. The message Lucas sent was clear. I value myself too much to accept this version of you. The question now is whether Brad received that message and took it seriously, or if he's simply betting on time and distance, having softened Lucas's resolve. Brad's pattern of self-sabotage. Throughout their tumultuous history together, Brad has consistently proven to be his own worst enemy. Long before Marco entered the picture, and even before the blackmail scandal with Portia, Brad's tendency toward deception and manipulation has created an exhausting cycle of crisis and temporary redemption. He gets caught doing something terrible, expresses remorse, promises to change, and then inevitably finds himself in another morally compromising situation. It's a pattern so predictable that those closest to him can see the warning signs from miles away: the subtle shift in his demeanor, the increased secrecy, the defensive reactions to innocent questions. Brad doesn't just stumble into trouble, he seems to actively seek it out, as if chaos is his natural habitat and genuine stability makes him uncomfortable. The question everyone in Port Charles should be asking isn't whether Marco is standing in Brad's way, it's whether Brad has finally developed the self-awareness and discipline to stay out of his own way. As his time traveling the world, experiencing different cultures, and presumably engaging in some level of self-reflection actually resulted in meaningful personal growth? Or has he simply been avoiding consequences while perfecting his ability to rationalize questionable behavior? The truth is, even if Brad returns as a completely reformed character with genuine intentions and a clean slate, the damage he's inflicted on Lucas's heart runs deep. Some scars don't heal just because time passes. They require proof of sustained change and the rebuilding of trust brick by painstaking brick. The complexity of forgiveness. Before Brad's departure from Port Charles, There had been encouraging signs that Lucas was beginning to forgive him for the catastrophic lies that destroyed their marriage. The revelation that Brad had orchestrated an elaborate cover-up involving their adopted son's death, swapping the deceased child with wily Corinthos, was the kind of betrayal that typically ends relationships permanently. Yet somehow, through countless difficult conversations and Lucas's inherent capacity for compassion, they had reached a point where civil conversation was possible. Lucas had seemingly made peace with the fact that Brad's actions, while unforgivable by many standards, came from a place of desperation rather than malice. He understood that Brad's fear of losing him had driven decisions that spiraled out of control. That hard-won progress deserves recognition, particularly when considering how Brad chose to handle the Portia situation. For once in his life, Brad made the difficult decision to be honest with Lucas about his misdeeds before someone else could expose them. He wanted to demonstrate that he could be trusted, that he was capable of choosing transparency over self-preservation. It was a significant step forward in Brad's personal development, showing that he understood what Lucas needed from him. Unfortunately, understanding what you should do and being able to follow through consistently are two very different things. Lucas's inability to overlook the blackmail situation wasn't about rejecting Brad's attempt at honesty. It was about recognizing that one moment of transparency doesn't erase a lifetime. Pattern of deception, current dynamics, and future possibilities. It remains far too premature to determine whether Brad has any realistic chance of reconciling with Lucas. Their current relationship barely qualifies as friendship by most definitions. The polite exchanges they share when their paths cross in Port Charles feel more like diplomatic negotiations between former adversaries than genuine warmth between people who once shared a home and a life together. When Lucas mentioned that it would have been acceptable for Brad to reach out and inform him about returning to town, there's a strong possibility he was simply employing the good manners and social graces that define his character. Lucas possesses the kind of emotional intelligence and decorum that allows him to navigate awkward social situations without creating additional drama traits that Brad has struggled to develop throughout his entire adult life. This fundamental difference in how they move through the world raises serious questions about their long-term compatibility. Lucas operates from a place of considering others' feelings and maintaining social harmony, while Brad tends to prioritize his own needs and desires, often justifying collateral damage as necessary or unavoidable. They're operating from completely different playbooks when it comes to relationships and ethics. Looking back at their history with clear eyes, it becomes difficult to understand how they ever formed a successful partnership in the first place. What attraction or connection was strong enough to bridge such vastly different approaches to life and relationships? The road ahead, as this complex situation continues to unfold. Port Charles residents and viewers alike are left wondering which version of Brad Cooper will emerge victorious: the reformed man genuinely seeking redemption, or the familiar schemer who can't resist manipulating circumstances to serve his agenda. There's certainly a scenario where Brad attempts to engineer Marco's downfall only to have the whole scheme backfire spectacularly. Imagine Brad carefully constructing a situation designed to make Marco look unfaithful or dishonest, only for Lucas to discover Brad's involvement and lose whatever remaining respect he held for his ex-husband. It would be classic Brad: brilliant in conception, disastrous in execution, and ultimately self-defeating. Alternatively, perhaps Brad surprises everyone by genuinely transforming himself, demonstrating through consistent actions over an extended period that he's capable of being the partner Lucas deserves. He could respect Lucas's relationship with Marco, support his happiness even when it hurts, and focus on becoming a better person rather than winning a prize. That kind of character development would require patience, humility, and sustained effort, qualities Brad has rarely displayed. The most likely outcome probably falls somewhere in between these extremes, with Brad making genuine progress while occasionally stumbling back into old habits, forcing Lucas to make difficult decisions about whether second chances can become third chances and whether hope for change is enough to risk his heart again. The story of Brad and Lucas serves as a compelling reminder that love alone isn't sufficient to sustain a relationship when fundamental issues of trust, respect, and compatibility remain unresolved. Their journey forward will reveal whether true change is possible or if some relationship fractures run too deep to ever fully heal. Next, we will learn about the issue of Jason Morgan and Britt Westburn's complicated romantic journey and the unexpected matchmaker who could bring these two star-crossed lovers back together in the most delightful way possible. The resurrection of romance. The return of Britt Westburn from the presumed dead has sent shockwaves throughout Port Charles. But perhaps no one has been more affected by her miraculous reappearance than the stoic and seemingly unshakable Jason Morgan. Their relationship has always been one of the most electrifying and unexpected pairings in General Hospital history, combining Britt's sharp wit and complex personality with Jason's quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. When they first came together, sparks flew in ways that neither of them anticipated, creating a connection that transcended their vastly different worlds and backgrounds. However, the brutal reality of being presumed dead for 2 long years has created an enormous chasm between them that cannot simply be bridged by their previous chemistry alone. Death, even when it turns out to be temporary in the soap opera world, has a way of fundamentally altering relationships and shifting priorities in ways that cannot be undone. Britt has found herself grappling with complex emotions since her return, torn between the lingering feelings she harbors for Jason and the harsh reality that life in Port Charles continued without her during those missing years. The 5 Poppies incident. The tension between Jason and Britt reached a boiling point during the harrowing ordeal at the 5 Poppies, an incident that exposed the raw nerves and unresolved feelings between these 2 complicated individuals. Britt's frustration and anger were entirely justified when she realized that Jason had not placed her safety and well-being at the top of his priority list during what was genuinely a life-or-death situation. For someone who had already experienced the trauma of being presumed dead and then fighting her way back to the living, being relegated to second place in Jason's hierarchy of concerns felt like a devastating betrayal that cut straight to her heart. The emotional wounds from that incident ran deep, creating barriers between them that seemed insurmountable at the time. Britt's pain was palpable, and her defensive walls went up higher than ever before. She had allowed herself to be vulnerable with Jason in the past, and the 5 Poppies situation made her question whether she could ever truly rely on him when the chips were down. The disappointment was written all over her face, and those who know Britt understand that she does not forgive easily when she feels abandoned or undervalued. Jason's powerful declaration. Everything shifted dramatically when Jason delivered an impassioned and heartfelt speech that penetrated Britt's carefully constructed emotional defenses. His words carried the weight of genuine emotion and sincere regret, showing a vulnerability that Jason Morgan rarely displays to anyone. The intensity of his declaration demonstrated that he had been thinking deeply about their situation and recognized the pain he had caused her. His speech was not just empty words or hollow apologies, but rather a genuine expression of his feelings and his commitment to making things right between them. The impact of Jason's words on Britt cannot be overstated. She found herself responding to his authenticity in ways she had not anticipated, feeling her resolve to maintain emotional distance beginning to crumble. The man standing before her was not just the Jason Morgan who had disappointed her at the 5 Poppies, but someone who had grown and evolved. Someone who was willing to fight for their connection despite all the complications and obstacles in their path. The Jen Sidwell entanglement. Britt's current predicament has become infinitely more complicated due to her entanglement with the dangerous and unpredictable Jen Sidwell. She finds herself trapped in a web of intrigue involving Caesar Faison's final project, a situation that carries enormous risks and potentially deadly consequences. The Faison connection alone is enough to send chills down anyone's spine, given the notorious villain's history of chaos and destruction throughout Port Charles. Being tied to any scheme involving Faison's legacy is like dancing with the devil himself, and Britt knows she is playing a dangerous game. The pressure on Britt has been mounting exponentially as Sidwell tightens his grip on her through her desperate need for Huntington's disease medication. This leverage gives him enormous power over her choices and actions, essentially holding her medical survival hostage to ensure her cooperation. The cruelty of using someone's life-threatening medical condition as a bargaining chip is not lost on anyone, and it places Britt in an impossible position where she must choose between her principles and her survival. Jason's heroic vow. True to his character as Port Charles's most reliable hero, Jason has made a solemn vow to secure Britt's freedom from Sidwell's controlling grasp. His determination to protect her demonstrates that his feelings run far deeper than simple attraction or nostalgia for their past relationship. Jason has proposed a brilliant solution, suggesting that they need to reverse engineer Britt's Huntington's medication to eliminate Sidwell's leverage over her completely. This strategic thinking shows Jason at his finest, combining his protective instincts with practical problem-solving abilities. The proposal to free Britt through medical innovation rather than violence or confrontation represents a mature and thoughtful approach to their crisis. Jason understands that simply removing Sidwell from the equation would not solve the underlying problem of Britt's medical dependency. By addressing the root cause of her vulnerability, he aims to give her true autonomy and freedom to make her own choices without external pressure or manipulation. The conflicted kiss. Britt's response to Jason's heroic declaration was both telling and frustrating. She kissed him with passion and intensity that revealed her true feelings could not be completely suppressed, no matter how much her rational mind tried to maintain distance. The kiss was electric, filled with all the chemistry and connection that had always existed between them. It was a moment of pure emotion and vulnerability that neither of them could deny or explain away. However, immediately following that intimate moment, Britt stubbornly refused to reveal the details of her involvement with Jen Sidwell. Her silence on this critical matter creates a dangerous information gap that could put both of them at risk. Jason needs to understand the full scope of what she is dealing with to effectively protect her and devise the best strategy for freeing her from Sidwell's control. Britt's refusal to confide in him suggests she is either trying to protect him from the dangerous knowledge or believes she must handle this burden alone. Brad Cooper's inside knowledge. The situation took an unexpected turn during a dine and dash adventure with Brad Cooper, where Britt finally opened up about everything she has been holding inside. Brad has always been Britt's closest confidant, someone who understands her complicated nature and accepts her completely despite all her flaws and questionable decisions. During their meal and subsequent hasty departure without paying, Britt spilled all her secrets about Sidwell, Faison's project, and most importantly, her unresolved feelings for Jason Morgan. Brad now possesses crucial information that makes him uniquely positioned to influence the trajectory of Britt and Jason's relationship. He knows the depth of Britt's feelings for Jason, even when she tries to deny them or push Jason away. He understands that her resistance is primarily based on fear and self-protection rather than genuine lack of interest. This dine and dash moment, which will undoubtedly come back to create problems for them later, has given Brad insight into Britt's heart in ways that even Jason does not currently possess. The matchmaker theory. Given everything Brad knows and his deep loyalty to his best friend, there is growing speculation among General Hospital fans that he may take it upon himself to play matchmaker for Britt and Jason. Brad has never been one to sit on the sidelines when he believes he can help someone he cares about, and his relationship with Britt is one of the most genuine and supportive connections in his life. He has repeatedly demonstrated his willingness to go to extraordinary lengths for Britt, sometimes crossing ethical and legal boundaries in the process. The twisted and beautiful friendship between Brad and Britt has been built on mutual understanding, acceptance, and unwavering support through numerous crises and scandals. They have each other's backs in ways that transcend normal friendship boundaries, creating a bond that is unbreakable despite their many flaws and mistakes. When one of them is in trouble or pain, the other invariably steps up to help, regardless of the personal cost or risk involved. Brad's personal motivation. Brad's potential role as Cupid may be further motivated by his own romantic disappointments and failures. His inability to reconcile with Lucas Jones has left a void in his life that makes him more determined to see Britt achieve the happiness that has eluded him. There is something bittersweet about watching someone you care about struggle with love when you are unable to fix your own romantic situation. Brad may channel his own frustrated romantic energy into ensuring that Britt does not make the same mistakes of letting true love slip away due to pride or fear. The pain of losing Lucas has fundamentally changed Brad's perspective on relationships and second chances. He understands now, perhaps more than ever, how precious genuine connection is and how devastating it can be to lose it through poor decisions or missed opportunities. This hard-earned wisdom could drive him to prevent Britt from experiencing the same regret and loneliness that currently haunts his own life. The romantic setup. Speculation is running wild about exactly how Brad might orchestrate romantic situations to bring Jason and Britt back together. His sneaky and creative nature means he could devise elaborate schemes to get them alone together in settings that encourage intimacy and honest conversation. Perhaps he might arrange for them to be trapped together somewhere, or create circumstances where they must work closely together on solving a problem. Brad's imagination and willingness to manipulate situations for what he perceives as the greater good make him a formidable matchmaker indeed. The beauty of having Brad as their Cupid is that he knows both Jason and Britt well enough to understand what approaches might actually work. He knows Britt's vulnerabilities and defenses, and he has observed enough about Jason to recognize what motivates him and draws him closer to people. This inside knowledge makes Brad uniquely qualified to create scenarios that bypass their usual resistance and force them to confront their feelings head-on. The undeniable attraction. Despite all the complications, obstacles, and emotional baggage between them, one fundamental truth remains crystal clear. Jason and Britt are still powerfully attracted to each other on multiple levels. Their chemistry is not something that can be fabricated or forced. It exists as a natural and undeniable force that draws them together despite their best efforts to maintain distance. The physical attraction is obvious, but there is also intellectual respect and emotional understanding that makes their connection particularly special and rare. The path forward for Jason and Britt promises to be filled with exciting twists, turns, and dramatic developments that will keep General Hospital fans on the edge of their seats. With Brad potentially working behind the scenes as their secret matchmaker, Sidwell's dangerous schemes looming over everything, and the ongoing complications of Britt's medical situation, there is no shortage of drama and intrigue in their storyline. The question is not whether they belong together, but whether they can overcome all the external and internal obstacles preventing them from claiming the happiness they both deserve.